April 8, 1943, 27,000 feet above Caen, France. Through the crystal-clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190, Oberleutnant Ralph Hermischen couldn't suppress his laughter. The veteran ace of Jagdgeschwader 26 watched as ungainly silhouettes climbed laboriously toward his formation. "The Americans have sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted to his wingman, unable to contain his amusement. Below him, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward. Their 2,000 horsepower engines strained against their 7-ton weight. To German pilots who'd faced sleek Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters, these barrel-shaped American machines looked almost comical. What Hermischen didn't know, what none of the German pilots circling like wolves above could have imagined, was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon that would systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transform from objects of derision into instruments of terror. Their 8 synchronized Browning machine guns would become the most feared sound in German skies. The mathematics of destruction were already loaded in those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to saw a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt had emerged from a June 1940 panic. As German fighters swept across France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They wanted a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's best. What Kartveli designed instead was a monster that redefined what was possible. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli admitted to his design team. "But it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." The prototype that first flew on May 6, 1941, shocked everyone who saw it. At 9,900 pounds empty, it weighed 65% more than its predecessor. The massive turbo supercharger system gave it an almost pregnant appearance. Test pilots approaching it for the first time invariably asked the same question: "This thing actually flies?" Not only did it fly, it flew like nothing else at altitude. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, producing 2,000 horsepower, could maintain full power at 27,000 feet, where German fighters gasped for air. The turbo supercharger, fed by exhaust gases, delivered sea-level performance in the stratosphere. Major Hubert Hub Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group, initially despised the aircraft. His unit lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 killed more Americans in training than Germans would in the first months of combat. It ground-looped on landing, torque-rolled on takeoff, and dove with such enthusiasm that pilots discovered compressibility, their controls freezing as shockwaves formed on the wings. But those who mastered it discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who would become one of America's top aces with 27 victories, described his first flight. "It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it. You aimed it." The first combat encounters in April and May 1943 confirmed every German prejudice. The P-47s couldn't turn with the Focke-Wulf 190, couldn't climb with the Messerschmitt 109s, couldn't match their nimble handling at medium altitudes. Hauptmann Josef Pips Priller, commanding officer of JG-26, reported to headquarters after his first encounter. "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys are calling them Indianer, fat targets pretending to be warriors." The statistics seem to confirm German confidence. In their first month of operations, American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German kills. The RAF, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, quietly suggested the Americans might reconsider their choice of mount. But something strange was happening in those early encounters, something German intelligence failed to notice. The P-47s that were shot down had absorbed incredible punishment before falling. One aircraft returned from a May 4th mission with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have disintegrated a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have stopped a liquid-cooled fighter cold. More significantly, when P-47s did get their guns on target, the results were catastrophic. The event that would begin changing German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943, over Étrepagny, France. Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s was returning from escort duty when they were bounced by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from JG-26. The Germans executed a perfect attack, diving from the sun with overwhelming speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, flying at the rear of the formation, was caught in the crossfire of multiple attackers. In the first seconds of combat, 21 20mm cannon shells exploded across his aircraft. The canopy shattered, hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit. The engine cowling was torn away. Fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel, tried to bail out, but the canopy was jammed. A 20mm shell had exploded in the canopy track, welding it shut. He was trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. What happened next defied every assumption about combat damage tolerance. Despite having no forward visibility through the oil-covered windscreen, a barely functioning engine that shook violently, and controls that responded only intermittently, Johnson managed to level the aircraft and point it toward England. The P-47 continued flying with damage that would have reduced any other fighter to falling debris. Then it got worse. A lone Focke-Wulf 190 discovered the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the channel at less than 170 miles per hour. What followed was one of the most extraordinary encounters in aerial warfare history. The German pilot positioned himself behind Johnson's P-47 and opened fire with his 4 20mm cannon and 2 13mm machine guns. Johnson, unable to evade, could only huddle behind his armor plate and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbed the entire cannon ammunition load. Then the German repositioned and fired again, this time with only his machine guns, the cannon ammunition exhausted. The German pilot pulled alongside, staring in disbelief at the flying wreck. Johnson could see his face clearly, young, blonde, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion to something approaching fear. The German repositioned and emptied his remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. Still, it flew. He pulled alongside again, shook his head in apparent amazement, gave an informal salute, and peeled away, presumably out of ammunition. Johnson's P-47 landed at Manston with its engine failing on the runway. The crew chief stopped counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One cannon shell had exploded inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the armor plate behind his seat. 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, were shot through. Yet the aircraft had brought him home. The survival of Johnson's aircraft sent shockwaves through both air forces. American engineers studying the wreckage realized they had underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, receiving combat reports, initially refused to believe it. No aircraft could absorb that much punishment. But testimony from multiple pilots confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had taken everything the Luftwaffe's best fighter could deliver, and survived. By July 1943, American pilots were learning to exploit the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke had discovered the secret through brutal trial and error. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The Thunderbolt's massive weight, initially seen as a disadvantage, became a weapon. In a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter could achieve, even in a vertical dive. This speed could be converted to altitude in a zoom climb that left pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Captain Walker, Bud Mahurin, developed what became known as the boom and zoom tactic, though pilots called it the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of engaging in traditional dogfights, P-47 formations would climb to 30,000 feet, higher than German fighters could effectively operate. When Luftwaffe fighters appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive, reaching speeds that made deflection shooting impossible for defending Germans. At the bottom of these dives, the American heavy machine guns would speak. German pilots who survived described it as facing a wall of lead. The combined firepower creating an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught in this convergence pattern didn't just fall, they disintegrated. The true revelation of American firepower came during the August 17, 1943 dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted to that date. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft positioning to attack B-17s with their heavy cannon and rocket armament. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into their attack dive from 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Hinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the Me-110s who survived, later recounted in POW interrogation, "The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters, good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from fuselage, tail severed, the crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, a 110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitt 100s and 10s were destroyed in less than a minute. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At convergence distance, typically set at 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected in a zone roughly 6 feet in diameter. Anything in that zone faced 100 half-inch projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the effect. When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was discovering another horrifying reality about the P-47. Its performance improved dramatically with altitude, while German fighters suffered. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained its rated power output up to 30,000 feet. German fighters, relying on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers, saw their performance degrade significantly above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, encountered this reality fatally on October 8, 1943. Leading Jagdgeschwader 1 against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190 sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. The BMW 801 engine, powerful at medium altitudes, was gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were sitting ducks. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot on his way to ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Philipp's distinctive Focke-Wulf with its elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report was clinical. Opened fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection, observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute observed. Philipp's death sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on both eastern and western fronts, couldn't survive against the Thunderbolts, what chance did average pilots have? The German High Command ordered an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report delivered to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943 was sobering. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could reach. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier. Its armor included 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates around the engine. Most disturbingly, its rugged construction allowed it to absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. In January 1944, a new variant of the P-47 began arriving in England that would complete the transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. The P-47 D-22 featured a Hamilton standard hydraulic propeller with paddle blades, 13 feet in diameter, with broad chord blades that bit into the air like massive oars. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and dramatic. Where earlier Thunderbolts had climbed at an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants could achieve 3,000 feet per minute. matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. Hauptmann Heinz Knoke of Jagdgeschwader 11, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He wrote in his combat diary, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than improve performance. It changed the sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive thundering roar created by the blade tips reaching supersonic speeds could be heard from miles away. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone, a deep, threatening rumble that meant death from above. They began calling it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. Major Günther Rall, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, mostly on the Eastern Front, survived an encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, that left him badly wounded. He later recalled in a post-war interview, "We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters, just gone, transformed into burning debris. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream meant instant death." By April 1944, as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France, P-47 units increasingly focused on ground attack, a role that would make them the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine gun battery proved equally effective against ground targets. The standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition could penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer volume of fire could destroy soft targets in seconds. A 2-second burst put 160 half-inch projectiles into a target area the size of a truck. But it was the addition of bombs and rockets that transformed the P-47 into a true multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder under the fuselage, a bomb load equal to early war medium bombers. Later variants added zero-length rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each equivalent to a 105mm artillery shell. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe discovered how completely the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47s provided air cover for the invasion, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were massacred. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader 2, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported, "The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We tried to break through at dawn, 12 fighters from our Gruppe. I was the only one to return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them. Couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain. In the weeks following D-Day, P-47s systematically destroyed German movement in daylight. The statistics were staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed 651 locomotives destroyed, 3,847 trucks destroyed, 512 tanks and armored vehicles destroyed, 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night, severely hampering there to respond to Allied advances. Behind the combat success lay an industrial achievement that the Germans simply couldn't match. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47s during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak production, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every hour, around the clock. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone contained 2,400 individual components, machined to tolerances of 1,000th of an inch. Yet American workers, many of them women who had never seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor, assembled these complex machines with precision that exceeded peacetime standards. The ammunition production was equally staggering. Each P-47 sortie required 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. With hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily missions, ammunition consumption exceeded 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several ammunition plants, produced 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge was manufactured to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring reliable feeding through the synchronized gun mechanisms. In March 1945, Oberst Josef Priller, the same pilot who had mocked the P-47s as pregnant cows 2 years earlier, was interviewed by German propaganda officials seeking to boost morale. His statement, deemed too demoralizing for publication, revealed the complete transformation in German attitudes. The Thunderbolt is the best fighter-bomber ever built. Its firepower is unprecedented. Weapons that never jam, never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and fights like a fighter when needed. But beyond the machine is what it represents: unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20. We lose 1, it's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for training, ammunition for practice, spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage. And courage without resources is just delayed defeat. We laughed at them in 1943. We're not laughing now. When you hear those guns, you know death has come calling. The sound haunts us, mechanical, precise, unstoppable. Like everything American, it's about overwhelming material superiority. They didn't beat us through better tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under an avalanche of steel and lead. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. Experienced pilots were dead or captured. Airfields were cratered ruins. The final statistics of P-47 operations defied comprehension. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. 3,315 aircraft destroyed on the ground. 86,000 railway cars destroyed. 9,000 locomotives destroyed. 6,000 armored fighting vehicles destroyed. 68,000 trucks destroyed, 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The 9th Air Force alone, primarily equipped with P-47s, flew 213,873 combat sorties, dropped 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched 60,000 rockets. The Thunderbolt units achieved a 4.6 to 1 kill ratio in aerial combat, while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter-bomber. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, former adversaries met in peace. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, was asked about the P-47. His response, recorded on video, captured the complete transformation. "We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat, we said. They built a bomber and called it a fighter. We were the ones who didn't understand. The Americans didn't try to build a European fighter. They built an American one, designed around production, firepower, and survivability. They understood that in a war of attrition, the plane that could take punishment and deliver devastating firepower would win." They were right. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, I understood everything. The power was incredible. The cockpit was comfortable. The visibility excellent. The controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft wrapped in armor. But what really impressed me was realizing that America built over 15,000 of these complex machines while fighting a two-ocean war. Each one required an engine more complex than anything Germany produced. Yet they built them faster than we could build simple fighters. That's when I knew we never had a chance. Those guns, we called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it destroyed it. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D sits among other legendary fighters. Below the display is a quote from an unnamed German pilot, taken from a 1945 interrogation report. "We laughed when we first saw them. Fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you and you ceased to exist." The laughter died with our comrades. The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as an object of derision and ended the war as an instrument of annihilation. In between, 8 synchronized Browning machine guns rewrote the rules of aerial warfare and buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of lead. German pilots had laughed at the ungainly American fighter in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken, and the sky belonged to America.